Today I'm shooting out noise gate pedals. And that may seem like a funny thing to make a video on because there's not much to explain. They're pretty simple pedals and they don't really make a sound. Quite the opposite. However, I wanted to test the release times of different noise gates because it's not often published information, and we all have probably experienced that some are a little faster or a little slower, but how do we really quantify that, and how big of a difference is it really? I do want to clear up a potential misconception some people may have that a noise gate is somehow filtering your signal, that it's changing your sound, that it's going to mess up your tone. And that's not what a noise gate does. It's a simple on-off thing. When your guitar's playing, it does nothing. And when you stop playing, it cuts the noise out. That's all it does. Anything else would be the realm of noise reduction. And there may be some gates that offer features like that, but a gate is a real on-off type deal. Now, coming up with an accurate and repeatable test for the release times required a little bit of extra thinking, but the solution I came up with is pretty simple. I have a white noise clip that I've split into soft and loud sections representing when your guitar's playing and when it's not. The softer section is around minus 45 dB, representing the noise floor of your amp gain, your pedals, your pickups, that kind of stuff. And then the louder one at around minus 12 dB, representing your actual guitar signal. This way we have a clear cutoff point, and we can make more accurate measurements, as well as set the thresholds more consistently between the pedals, because measuring the release times off of an actual guitar signal, as I found, was very difficult. So it's much easier to do it with just a block of noise that gets quiet. You measure out the release time in milliseconds, and we have some numbers here. Going head to head today in a battle to the death, we've got the Amuzik noise gate, which was the cheapest noise gate I could find on Amazon and came in under $20. I've got the other end of the spectrum here, the ISP Decimator, which is very shiny and does not like to be filmed, apparently. And I've got my Boss Noise Reducer NR300. This is another budget one. But wait, there's more. I enlisted the help of my friend Lee from the Metal Prognosis, all the way over, down under, in Australia.
Welcome to the Metal Prognosis. My name is Lee.
And I sent him my test files, and he was nice enough to run my test files through his collection of noise gates. And so from Lee, we've got the TC Electronics Sentry, the Electro-Harmonix Silencer, the Rowin noise gate, the Donner noise killer, and a Fortin Zuul clone that I believe a friend of his made. It's like a DIY thing, but it works pretty well, right? I hope so. If you play a high gain rig, you've got a lot of extra noise from your amp, from distortion pedals, and some of these pedals offer an extra way of controlling that with this 4-cable method, like this Behringer and a bunch of others on this list do, which allows you to send your clean guitar in, your dry guitar, into the pedal to act as the trigger for the gate. This will be the best signal, the cleanest source of information for the gate to respond to. But then with this send return function, you can loop in your distortion pedals or your entire amp, if it has an effects loop, into that. And then the gate, once triggered by your guitar is silent, then the gate will clamp down all of that noise in your entire signal, and you'll be left with a very clean, pristine sound. It's a very nice feature. I highly recommend it in a noise gate. And so of these pedals, the ones that offer that, in order of price from lowest to highest, are this Behringer, which is a clone of the Boss NS2, so that also has it. The Electro-Harmonix Silencer also does. The TC Electronics Sentry, the Fortin Zuul, and the Decimator II G-String, which is not this one. This is the Decimator 1 not G-String edition, and does not have this. But the G-String edition, which is quite a bit more expensive than all the pedals on this list, besides maybe the Fortin, that does have this 4-cable method, so that's something to consider. But this one's $25. The G-String Decimator is like $250, $230, something like that. Quite a lot more. Now, I know you want to get into the results of this test, so without further ado, from slowest to fastest, we have the Amuzik noise gate as well as the Rowin. Those both come in the same form factor. There's a lot of these out there on the market for cheap from a bunch of different brands, and these two were identical. I would assume most of them are identical. that's got a pretty slow release at 300 milliseconds in the hard mode, which is as fast as it goes. It's not terrible, it's perfectly usable, but that's a pretty slow and not very snappy gate. Next up is the Behringer NR300, which, as stated, is based on the Boss NS2, so that is probably going to have the same release time, and again, this is set as fast as possible with the decay. That is 250 milliseconds. Also, not very fast, though it's good in other ways. Like, it's got the effects loop thing. Next is the Donner Noise Killer, and even though it's another one of these Chinese mini pedals, it does have quite a bit faster release time at 140 milliseconds. Then I've got the ISP Decimator 1 coming in at 120 milliseconds. The Electro-Harmonix Silencer in this test was 95 milliseconds, but on their website, they say it goes down to 8 milliseconds, and I'll take their word for that. This was just how Lee had it set up, and I didn't have it here to mess around with it myself. After that was the Fortin Zuul clone, and I will assume that that has the same release as the original. That was 65 milliseconds. And the fastest one in this test was the TC Electronics Sentry at 8 milliseconds, which is probably as fast as it gets. But I will assume that the Electro-Harmonix can go that fast too, and that's a very fast gate, maybe even too fast. So what kind of release time should you be looking for? When I'm setting up a noise gate plugin, I usually start around 75 milliseconds. I find that's a pretty good spot that's fast enough, it's tight, but it's not too fast that it sounds artificial and sounds kind of fake. You can go faster if you like the effect and if you really want it to be very extreme and kind of exaggerated, and you can go a little slower depending on what you're doing and how fast you need it to be. The Decimator here is a great pedal, and I use it on my live bass rig. However, at 120 milliseconds, it's not quite fast enough for more modern, highly gated stuff. For most things, it's just fine, and it's a pretty fast release time, but it's not the tightest by more modern standards. The little Amuzik noise gate that I got for less than $20, I wish was faster. At 300 milliseconds, it's really not quite fast enough for that type of stuff. It works fine. It is a noise gate. It does the job. I just wish it was faster. Otherwise, don't have any problems with it. But if you are going to get one, you might as well just try to find the cheapest version that you can. It doesn't really matter the brand because they're apparently all the same, except for the Donner, which I would recommend over it because that's faster. And if you can get it for the same price, definitely go with the Donner. But it's not even quite as fast as the Decimator, so it doesn't quite do it for really modern gated stuff. If you do want a really fast gate for your cool gent band, then I would go with either the TC Electronics Sentry or the Electro-Harmonix Silencer or the Zuul, though buying a Zuul is quite expensive and can be hard to do. So I think all in all, my top choice of these, even though I don't own one, is the TC Electronics Sentry. I think it offers the best features, and it's kind of a plug-in in a physical pedal. You can actually change the parameters. It's got like 3-band gating. It's got a lot of features in the software. You can hook it up with your computer, and you can program it like a plug-in. So that's awesome, and maybe I'll buy one at some point because I really like that. That being said, if you can use a plug-in, you should. I think they're simply better at the job of noise gating. It's not a question of tone, it's a question of numbers, and plugins win when it comes to numbers. They're faster, they're more customizable, many of them are free, you can't beat the price. Even if you're reamping, you can use a plugin after your DI track. Going to the amp, you can use another noise gate after the amp to cut out the noise floor of that, and you don't need an actual pedal at all. So I would just do that. But if you're playing live, you should have a noise gate. And I'd love to tell you that you can go out and buy the cheapest noise gate on the market and it'll do the job just as well as the expensive ones. But today, unfortunately, I can't really tell you that. The Electro-Harmonix Silencer is also a good choice that's a little cheaper. The problem I have with the Electro-Harmonix is that in all the test files I have, it's got a pretty slow attack time. Now, it's hard to hear it, so it doesn't seem to make a huge difference, but it bothers me, and it's around 20 milliseconds, which is significant. So I have a hard time recommending that just for that reason, when there's other good options out there. I'm sure it's a fine pedal, except for that. So that makes it a less fine pedal. But the price is good. It has the 4-cable wiring. It is very fast. It's not a bad option all around. It's just that attack time does bother me. The rest of them have very little to no attack time. Some of them have a tiny fade in, but really nothing noticeable. But 20 milliseconds seems like that could risk cutting off some transients. May not matter, but if you're recording with it a lot, then that could be a problem. I think live, it wouldn't matter. It'd be fine. But in a recording situation, I'd be a little bit bothered by that. Another one I tested out for fun is a plugin that also doesn't tell you the release time, and that's the gate in the Audio Assault amp sims. I use these sims a lot. I use this gate a lot. It's really good, and I don't have any complaints, so I pretty much always use that when I'm using their amps. It's got a release time of 80 milliseconds, which again, I think is a nice spot. It's not the fastest, but it really doesn't need to be any faster. I never notice it being slow, and I guess if it bothers you, you could try out a faster one, but I think that's a good speed for a gate, so I'm happy with that. And it's a little bit faster than the actual Decimator, which the graphic is clearly looks like a Decimator, but the Decimator was around 120 milliseconds. This is 80. It's actually faster than a Decimator, so it's not 100% faithful analog model of the Decimator gate. Also, the Decimator is technically a downward expander, and I would imagine their noise gate is probably actually a noise gate. Not that it really matters that much. It's just a little different technology. Maybe a downward expander sounds better. I don't know. That's what ISP thinks, and I think they make a fine pedal, so who am I to complain? To put this into a little real-world context, I've got a little guitar DI, just a few notes, just so you can hear the release times of each of these pedals. So what you're hearing is the gated DI tracks all being run to the same amp sim. There's no gate on the amp sim, of course. And the only one that's a little funny is the Sentry, which Lee set up, and the threshold was just a little too high, so it kind of cuts out a little early. Don't think that's a fault of the pedal. I think that's user error, and there's a threshold knob for that reason. So sorry for the criticism, Lee. You failed, but you also helped out a lot, so thank you. So I hope you've learned something today. I sure have. All these noise gates have different release times. Who could have guessed it? But now you know what they are because nobody else will tell you. That's why you come to me for the good stuff, the real information. As always, please smash like, please subscribe, and drop in the comments what your favorite gate is and why that makes your tone better than everyone else's. I'll see you in the next video.